There's a national alert level for wildfire in the United States. It runs from 1 to 5. 5 is the maximum, and almost no member of the public has ever heard of it. On the 18th of July, 2026, the country hit level 5, and it has not come back down. What that number actually measures is not danger. It measures how close the nation is to running out of people. Level 5, the United States does not have enough crews, aircraft, and engines to fight every fire at full strength, which means that somewhere in a building in Boise, Idaho, coordinators are deciding every day which fires get fewer resources than their commanders asked for. This year, America has already had 46,305 wildfires and lost more than 6.4 million acres, 156% of the 10-year average, and the worst months of the season are still ahead. What happens when the next big fire starts and there is nobody left to send is the question underneath all of it. But first, what that alert level really means. Most people assume firefighting works like police or ambulance coverage, that each area has its own crews, and when something burns, the local ones turn out. For a house fire, that is broadly true. For wildland fire in the United States, it is not how the system is built at all. Wildland firefighting resources in America are a shared national pool. The hotshot crews, the engines, the air tankers, the helicopters, and the incident management teams that actually run large fires are not owned by the fire they are working on, and often not by the state they are standing in. They are mobilized nationally, moved between fires as priorities shift, and allocated through the National Interagency Coordination Center inside the National Interagency Fire Center in Boise, Idaho, the country's logistical support center for wildland fire. The country is divided into geographic areas, each with its own coordination center. When an area burns through its own resources, it asks the national pool for more. The whole thing runs on a rulebook reissued every year. The National Interagency Standards for Resource Mobilization, the 2026 edition, is in force right now. That structure is genuinely impressive. It lets the United States concentrate an extraordinary amount of force on whichever fire most needs it, anywhere in the country, within a day or two. It also has one built-in consequence that nobody can engineer away. Every crew committed to one fire is a crew that is not available for the next one. It is worth being concrete about what resources actually means here, because the word makes it sound like equipment sitting in a warehouse. It is not. The core of it is people, and specifically trained, qualified, physically tested people organized into crews. The 20-person hotshot crews that cut line in the worst terrain, engine crews, helitack crews, smoke jumpers, and the incident management teams that run a large fire as an organization. Above them sit the aircraft, air tankers, scoopers, and helicopters, each with pilots who hold specific wildfire qualifications. None of that can be conjured mid-season. A qualified crew member is the product of training, a fitness standard, and years of accumulated experience under supervision. And the certifications that let someone run a large incident take longer still. So when the national pool is committed, the shortfall cannot be solved with money that week. The country has what it has, and the only remaining levers are moving those people around faster, working them harder, or accepting that some fires get less. That is what the preparedness level measures. Level 1 means resources are plentiful and demand is low. Level 5 means the national pool is committed, competition between fires is severe, and the system has very little left in reserve. It is not a measure of how dangerous the weather is. It is a measure of how empty the shelf is. America reached that maximum on the 18th of July. To understand why that date matters so much, it helps to know where July sits in a fire year. In the western United States, the season typically builds through summer and peaks from roughly August into October, when fuels are at their driest and the wind events arrive. Hitting the ceiling in mid-July means the country arrived at maximum resource strain, with the hardest part of the season still in front of it rather than behind it. And the numbers behind that are not marginal. So far in 2026, firefighters have responded to 46,305 wildfires, which have burned more than 6.4 million acres. That is 126% of the 10-year average for the number of fires and 156% of the 10-year average for the area burned. Nearly 30,000 personnel are currently assigned to incidents nationwide. The Northwest is the busiest corner of the country right now, with 45 uncontained large fires burning at once in that geographic area alone. Now the part that should be better known than it is, when the system is this strained, coordinators are forced into allocation decisions. Reporting on the situation put it plainly. The United States does not currently have enough resources to fight every wildfire with a full force, and if another especially large fire ignites while resources remain this committed, federal coordinators have to decide which ongoing and smaller fires will be handled with fewer resources. That is triage, in the medical sense, and it deserves to be described accurately rather than sensationally. Nobody is being abandoned, and no coordinator is choosing which town burns down. What is actually happening is quieter and more uncomfortable than that. A fire that would normally get 20 crews gets 8, A request for 2 air tankers gets 1. A smaller fire that would ordinarily be attacked hard on day 1 gets monitored instead because the resources that would have hit it are already assigned to something bigger. Most of the time, that works out. The smaller fire stays small, the weather cooperates, and nobody ever learns how close it came. The problem is what happens on the day the weather does not cooperate. There's also a human cost inside the system itself that the numbers never show. Wildland assignments are typically worked in long stretches with mandatory rest between them, and at Preparedness Level 5, those rest periods come under pressure because there's nobody spare to rotate in. Crews finish one fire and are reassigned to the next rather than going home. Fatigue accumulates across an entire season, and fatigue on a fire line is not an inconvenience. It is the condition under which people get hurt. A system at its ceiling is not only short of crews today, it is quietly spending the crews it will need in September. When it gets to this point, the country does have places left to look. At the highest preparedness levels, the United States can request support beyond the civilian wildland agencies, military assistance, and firefighting personnel and aircraft from partner countries, an arrangement that has run in both directions for years between the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Those options exist precisely because a bad season can exceed one country's capacity. But they take time to activate, and they are not a bottomless reserve either. The Northern Hemisphere countries that would help are usually burning at the same time of year, which is exactly what happened outside Spokane, Washington on the 1st of August. A fire started around midday and ran into a dry, cold front. Sustained winds of 33 miles an hour gusting to 44, 86 degrees, and humidity down at 20 to 25%. It burned 3,226 acres. By Western standards, that is a small fire. There are single fires in this season that burned 100 times that, but it destroyed 694 structures on its own, and the Spokane complex as a whole passed 700, making it the most destructive wildfire in the recorded history of Washington state. Nearly 65,000 people evacuated. Investigators have since arrested and charged a man with first-degree arson in connection with it. He is accused, not convicted, and the case has not been tried. That fire is the illustration of the whole problem. It was not big, it was fast, it was in the wrong place, and it happened during a period when the national system was already at its ceiling. And it was not alone that weekend. Across the United States, 183 new fires started in a single weekend, including 8 large ones with more than 30,000 personnel and over 640 crews assigned across the country. In Utah, the Rocky Canyon fire grew past 2,800 acres after starting on a Friday and stood at 0% containment by Sunday, burning about 30 miles northeast of Salt Lake City with evacuations underway in Morgan County. 0% containment means no part of the fire's edge has been secured. Across the border, more than 20,000 people fled communities along Okanagan Lake in British Columbia over the same weekend, and the province declared a state of emergency covering all of it. That fire is not on American ground, but its smoke is part of the layer now sitting over the Pacific Northwest. 183 ignitions in 2 days into a system that was already at maximum. That is not the pool being reinforced. That is the pool being divided. And the arithmetic of that weekend explains the whole problem better than any single statistic. 8 of those 183 were classified as large fires. A large fire does not need a crew or 2. It needs an incident management team, multiple hotshot crews, engines, aircraft, and a supply operation, and it holds them for days or weeks rather than hours. 8 new large fires in one weekend, on top of 45 already uncontained in the Northwest alone, is a demand spike arriving at the exact moment there is nothing spare to meet it with. There's a detail in all of this that is easy to miss and worth stating, because it cuts against the impression that everything is failing. In the Spokane fires, 700 structures destroyed, 65,000 people moved, a firestorm running through populated ground. No deaths or injuries have been confirmed. Officials cautioned that a full assessment takes time, but the evacuation orders went out early and people moved. That is what a stretched system still does well. Warning and evacuation are relatively cheap in resources, alerts, deputies, road closures, a siren. What is expensive is the thing that saves buildings. Crews on the ground, engines on the street, aircraft overhead, hour after hour for days. So when the national pool runs down, it is not usually lives that go first, it is structures. The system protects people even when it cannot protect property. And at Preparedness Level 5, that trade-off gets made more often, in more places, with less discussion than anyone would like. There is one more consequence of a stretched system that reaches people who will never see a flame, and it is the smoke. Dense smoke is now sitting across the Pacific Northwest, fed by fires in several states and by the fires burning in British Columbia. Wildfire smoke carries fine particulate matter deep enough into the lungs to enter the bloodstream, and it travels hundreds of miles from its source, which is why cities with no fire anywhere near them record some of the worst air quality in the country during a season like this. When more fires are being monitored rather than attacked, more of them keep producing smoke for longer. And that cost lands on people with asthma, on heart and lung patients, on the elderly, and on children in states that never had an evacuation order. The season is not over. The Northwest still has 45 uncontained large fires. The country is still at its maximum alert level, and the months that historically produce the worst fires are the ones now arriving. Subscribe for the real numbers on the next one, verified and in full.